A family was tormented for years by something that could talk, sing, and even poison. To this day, no one knows what it really was. In 1817, in Robertson County, Tennessee, near a small settlement called Adams, a prosperous and respected farmer named John Bell begins hearing strange sounds he cannot explain. He owns a large productive farm, has a devoted wife named Lucy, and several children, the youngest of whom, a bright and well-liked girl named Betsy, will soon become the center of everything that follows. At first, the disturbances are almost nothing, faint knocking against the outer walls late at night, as if some animal were testing the timber. Then comes a dry, scratching sound, slow and deliberate, seeming to move along the boards with no visible cause. John dismisses it at first, assuming rats or foxes or simply the wind finding a gap in the old wood. But the sounds continue night after night, never quite explained, never quite ignorable. One evening, walking the edge of his fields at dusk, John spots something crouched at a distance among the fence posts, a strange creature unlike anything native to the county, with the general shape of a large dog, but a head that seems almost bird-like in proportion. He raises his gun instinctively, but before he can take proper aim, the creature simply isn't there anymore, vanished as if it had never existed at all. He tells no one at first, uncertain of what he actually saw, or fearing what people might think if he spoke of it aloud. Within weeks, whatever is causing the disturbance grows bold enough to move indoors. The children report chains dragging slowly across the floorboards at night, and a persistent gnawing sound coming from the bedposts themselves, as though something were testing the wood with teeth. Blankets begin sliding off sleeping children on their own, pulled away by hands nobody can see. A cold, sharp slapping sensation strikes bare cheeks in the dark, leaving no mark but the shock of it. Of all the children, Betsy suffers the worst by far. Her hair is yanked hard enough some nights to pull her upright out of a sound sleep, and small pins are later found jabbed in her skin, though no one nearby could possibly have placed them there. Lucy sits up with her some nights, holding a candle, terrified of what the morning light might reveal on her daughter's arms. John himself begins suffering strange physical episodes of his own, fits that leave his face twisted, his jaw locked, his tongue swollen so severely that eating or speaking becomes almost impossible for hours at a stretch. A local doctor is eventually called to examine him, and leaves the farmhouse baffled, unable to identify any known illness that matches what he has just witnessed with his own eyes. Word of the disturbances inevitably spreads through the county, farmer to farmer, church pew to church pew, until neighbors start arriving specifically to witness the phenomena themselves, some out of genuine concern, others out of pure curiosity. A handful of self-declared skeptics visit the farm specifically intending to expose an obvious hoax, only to leave hours later pale and unwilling to discuss exactly what changed their minds. A respected local minister named James Johnston, known throughout the county for his steady temperament, spent an entire night in the house at the family's request, and afterward refuses ever to speak in detail about what happened during those hours, saying only that he now believes every word the family has told him. The family begins taking turns keeping watch over Betsy through the night, never leaving her alone in a room for more than a few minutes at a time, though the precaution rarely seems to help. Then, one night, the presence tormenting the family does something it has never done before. It speaks. At first, it's barely more than a whisper, a faint murmur with no clear source, easy to mistake for wind moving through a gap in the wall. But within days, the whisper grows into full, clearly articulated sentences, spoken in a voice that seems to come from everywhere in the room and nowhere specific all at once. Over time, the voice claims to be many different things depending on who asks and when. Sometimes it calls itself a wandering, restless spirit with no fixed home. Other times, it claims to be the ghost of an old woman who once lived nearby. It even suggests, on occasion, that it is the disturbed spirit of someone buried in unmarked ground close to the property. Locals eventually settle on calling it simply the Bell Witch, and the name sticks permanently to the case. Some point specifically to a neighboring woman named Kate Batts, with whom John Bell reportedly had a bitter, unresolved land dispute, and the entity itself, strangely, seems to encourage that association, occasionally referring to itself as Kate. As weeks turn into months, the voice grows steadily more confident and articulate. It quotes long passages of scripture without error, sings hymns in harmony alongside visiting preachers, and mimics the voices of family members with unsettling, flawless precision. Visitors soon discover it will engage in actual conversation, answering direct questions, debating scripture with visiting ministers, and occasionally making specific predictions about small local events that go on to come true within days. It seems to know everything that happens inside the house at all times, repeating private conversations back to the family word for word, including things said in rooms where it could not possibly have been present. According to local legend, The case eventually draws the attention of Andrew Jackson himself, years before he becomes president, who travels to the farm with several companions specifically to witness the phenomenon firsthand. As the story goes, his wagon mysteriously refuses to move partway down the lane leading to the property, wheels seemingly locked in place for no discernible reason, until an unseen voice announces, almost playfully, that it will now allow them to pass. One of Jackson's own men, a self-proclaimed witch hunter carrying a special silver bullet, reportedly gets thrown bodily across a room by something neither he nor anyone else present can see. Jackson reportedly leaves the farm deeply shaken, remarking privately that he would rather face the entire British Army again than spend another night anywhere near that house. His traveling companions corroborate the story for years afterward, even as skeptics in later generations question whether Jackson ever actually visited the farm at all, a debate that historians still argue over to this day. Through all of this, the witch reserves its cruelest, most sustained torment specifically for John Bell, as though it carries a very personal grudge against him alone that it refuses to explain, no matter how many times family members or visiting preachers ask directly. When his daughter Betsy grows close to a local young man named Joshua Gardner, the entity turns its focus toward the relationship with startling intensity. Whenever his name is even mentioned in the house, Betsy is struck by invisible force, left gasping in pain in front of horrified onlookers. The disturbances happen so consistently and cause her such genuine suffering that under the mounting pressure, Betsy eventually feels she has no real choice but to end the engagement herself, despite clearly caring for him deeply. By 1820, John Bell's health has declined dramatically, his once strong body racked by seizures, unexplained facial paralysis, and long stretches where he can barely rise from bed at all. One morning, his family discovers a small, unlabeled vial containing a dark, unidentified liquid sitting on the nightstand beside him, though no one in the household admits to placing it there or even recognizes it. When a family member, out of desperate curiosity, tests a small amount of the liquid on the family cat, the animal reportedly dies almost instantly. Soon afterward, the entity's voice declares, with what witnesses describe as unmistakable triumph, that it gave John Bell the poison itself, and that it fully intends to finish what it started once and for all. John Bell dies not long after, and according to several witnesses present, the voice sings gleefully throughout the funeral procession itself, an old drinking tune entirely inappropriate for the somber occasion, audible to multiple mourners at once. With the man it seemed to hate most now gone, the haunting begins, gradually, to lose its intensity, growing quieter and less frequent with each passing month. Before it fades away entirely, the entity makes one final, specific promise to the remaining family, that it will return to visit them again in exactly 7 years' time. True to that unsettling promise, family members do report a brief final visitation years later, primarily focused on one of John's surviving sons, though by every account it never again approaches the same overwhelming intensity of those earlier years. After that final, muted appearance, the presence departs for good, and the Bell family, understandably, never speaks of trying to summon or contact it again. In the decades that follow, the case becomes one of the most extensively documented hauntings in all of American history, discussed at length in regional newspapers, personal letters, and eventually entire published books devoted specifically to cataloging every known detail, including one lengthy volume compiled directly from surviving family testimony decades after the events themselves. Skeptics have proposed everything from elaborate family hoaxes to underlying medical or psychological explanations for John Bell's specific physical symptoms. Yet no single theory has ever managed to satisfactorily account for everything multiple independent witnesses swore to have personally seen and heard over those 3 long, difficult years. Later writers and filmmakers borrow freely from the case for decades afterward, and the story is frequently cited as one of the earliest and most influential haunted house tales in the country's folklore. To this day, no conclusive, universally accepted explanation exists for what actually tormented that particular Tennessee farmhouse. The cave located near the original property still bears the Bell Witch's name to this day, and continues to draw curious visitors from across the country, and occasionally from much farther abroad, all hoping to feel some faint trace of whatever happened there. Local guides still recount the story to every group that passes through, pointing out the exact spots where specific incidents are said to have occurred, and small local festivals still mark the anniversary of the case every year. Whatever truly haunted that family for those 3 relentless years remains, like so many strange legends that came before and after it, entirely and completely unresolved. If you enjoyed this story, like and subscribe for more real, unexplained mysteries.